The last thing I expected on the day my flower shop was supposed to die was to be watched by a man who looked like he could buy the entire city without checking the price. My name is Olivia Carter, and if you had walked past Carter Blooms on that cold Thursday morning, you probably wouldn't have noticed it. Most people didn't anymore. The little flower shop sat between a struggling bakery and a dry cleaner that had somehow survived 3 recessions. The paint on my sign was fading. The front window had a crack running through one corner. And inside I was standing behind the counter trying to figure out how to save a dream that was slipping through my fingers one unpaid bill at a time. Outside, grey clouds hung low over Manhattan, the kind of clouds that made the city feel tired. I wrapped brown paper around a bouquet of white daisies and tied it with a pale blue ribbon. My fingers moved automatically. After 5 years of arranging flowers, I could do it with my eyes closed. Flowers had always made sense to me. People didn't. Flowers never lied. They never pretended to be something they weren't. A rose was a rose. A sunflower was a sunflower. They bloomed, they faded, they told the truth. My landlord had given me exactly 7 days. 7 days to pay 3 months of overdue rent or leave. I glanced at the envelope sitting beside the register. Final Naughter was stamped across the front in red letters that felt almost cruel against the cream-colored paper. I looked away. Some problems only got bigger when you stared at them. The bell above the door jingled softly. I looked up and smiled automatically. The smile felt heavier lately, but I still gave it away for free. An elderly woman stepped inside, pulling her coat tighter around her thin shoulders. I recognized her immediately. Mrs. Patterson. She came in every Thursday, not because she could afford flowers, because she missed her husband. For 3 years she'd bought a single flower every week and placed it beside his photograph at home. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," I said. Her face brightened. She walked slowly toward the display buckets. Her eyes drifted across the flowers. Tulips, carnations, lilies. Then I watched the smile fade slightly. She checked her purse. I already knew what she was going to find. Not enough. It happened more often lately. Inflation didn't care about lonely hearts. "How much for the yellow roses?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. The truth sat heavy in my chest. $4 each. Her fingers tightened around the purse strap. "Maybe next week." She tried to smile. It broke my heart every time. I reached into the display bucket and pulled out 3 roses, bright yellow, fresh from that morning's delivery. Before she could protest, I wrapped them carefully and handed them to her. "Olivia, no." She frowned. "By who?" I smiled. "A secret admirer." Her eyes softened. I thought she might cry. Instead, she squeezed my hand. "The world needs more people like you." If only she knew. Kindness didn't pay rent. Kindness didn't keep the lights on. Kindness definitely didn't stop banks from sending overdue notices. But I couldn't help myself. My mother used to say that flowers existed because God wanted proof that beauty could survive difficult seasons. I liked believing that, even now, especially now. After she left, the shop became quiet again. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of roses and eucalyptus, the ticking clock above the doorway. I checked my phone. No new orders, no missed calls, no miracles, just silence. Around noon, rain began tapping gently against the front windows. The city blurred beyond the glass. People hurried past, carrying umbrellas. Nobody stopped. Nobody came inside. I stood near the window, holding a spray bottle, misting a collection of pink peonies that would probably never sell. That's when I noticed the car. Black, elegant, expensive enough to make every other vehicle on the block look ordinary. It pulled to the curb across the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. Wealthy people pass through Manhattan every day, but then the car stayed 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. The engine remained running. Rain slid down the tinted windows. I couldn't see who was inside. Something about it felt strange, not threatening, just deliberate, like someone had arrived somewhere important and wasn't ready to leave. I told myself to stop staring. Curiosity had always been one of my worst habits. I returned to trimming stems behind the counter. Another hour passed. The rain grew heavier. The streets became quieter. Then I heard the bell above the door ring again. I looked up expecting another customer who would browse for 5 minutes and leave empty-handed. Instead, I froze, because standing in the doorway was the man from the black car. He was tall, maybe 6'3", dark hair, dark coat, the kind of presence that changed the atmosphere of a room without trying. Rainwater glistened on his shoulders. For a second, neither of us spoke. His eyes moved across the shop, the flowers, the shelves, the handwritten signs. Then they landed on me. Strange. That was the first word that entered my mind. Not because he looked wealthy, because he looked sad, deeply sad, like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. "Can I help you?" I asked. His gaze lingered for half a second longer before he nodded. Maybe. His voice was calm, low, controlled. He stepped further inside. The scent of rain followed him. Outside, thunder rumbled softly somewhere beyond the skyline. Inside, my heart did something unexpected. It sped up, not because I was afraid, because suddenly it felt like the story of my life was about to change, and I had absolutely no idea why. For a moment, neither of us moved. Rain tapped softly against the front window while the scent of fresh roses drifted through the quiet shop. The stranger stood just inside the doorway, water glistening on his dark coat, looking completely out of place among the buckets of flowers and handwritten price tags. He belonged in glass skyscrapers and private elevators. Not here, not in my little shop that was one overdue payment away from disappearing forever. I cleared my throat and forced myself to smile. Maybe, I repeated. His eyes seemed to focus again, as if he had been somewhere far away. I need flowers. I glanced around the store. That is fortunate. I happen to sell those. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like he remembered what smiling felt like. How many? I asked. He looked around the room. Every arrangement, every bouquet, every colorful display I had spent hours preparing that morning. Then he said something that made me wonder if I had heard him correctly. I blinked. I am sorry? Everything. His voice remained calm. I would like to buy everything. The spray bottle slipped slightly in my hand. Everything? Yes. I stared at him. My first thought was that this had to be some kind of joke, maybe a hidden camera show, maybe one of those social media pranks people filmed for views. But the man standing in front of me did not look like someone who played practical jokes. He looked serious, very serious. You mean a few arrangements? I asked carefully. No. Flowers for an event? No. A wedding? No. Then why would you need every flower in the store? For the first time, something changed in his expression. His eyes met mine directly, deep brown, quiet, heavy with things he was not saying. Because you smiled. The words landed softly, almost too softly. I felt my heart stumble for reasons I could not explain. That does not make any sense, I know. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a business card. Thick paper, expensive, simple black lettering, Sebastian Romano, no title, no company name, just a phone number beneath it, somehow that felt even more intimidating. I looked back up. Mr. Romano, buying every flower in my shop would cost thousands of dollars. That is fine. What are you going to do with them? His gaze drifted briefly toward the window where rain continued falling over the city. That part is still a work in progress. I should have laughed. I should have told him no. But there was something about him that made it difficult to dismiss him. He did not seem impulsive. He seemed like a man who rarely did anything without a reason, which only made this stranger. Are you serious? I asked. Completely. Silence settled between us again. Then he pulled out his wallet. 5 minutes later, I found myself standing behind the register, staring at a receipt larger than any transaction I had ever processed in my life. My hands literally shook. I checked the total 3 times, then 4, then 5. It was real. Every arrangement, in every bucket, sold, just like that. Months of financial stress loosened slightly inside my chest, not gone, but loosened. Sebastian watched quietly while I printed paperwork. He seemed uninterested in the money, uninterested in the flowers, as though neither had been the point. Do you have somewhere you would like these delivered? I finally asked. Not yet. Not yet? I will send instructions later. I laughed softly, despite myself. You bought an entire flower shop before figuring out where the flowers should go? Another almost smile. Apparently. The strange thing was that the more we talked, the less intimidating he became. He still carried that quiet authority, that unmistakable presence. But underneath it I sensed something else. Loneliness. The kind that sits beside you for years until you stop noticing it. You own businesses? I asked while organizing invoices. A few. That sounds like a rich person answer. It probably is. I smiled before I could stop myself, this time in an uncomfortable way, more like he was memorizing something. The realization made me look down quickly. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. Grey clouds shifted overhead. A little sunlight broke through. Sebastian glanced toward the front window, then back at me. You should smile more often. The comment caught me off guard. Most people tell me to work harder. Most people are wrong. I looked away, suddenly unsure what to say. Nobody had said something like that to me in a very long time. The past year had been filled with bills, deadlines, stress, and survival. Smiling had become something I gave customers, not something I actually felt. A vibration broke the moment. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up. The screen displayed another message from my landlord. My stomach dropped immediately. Final reminder, payment due in 7 days. Failure to comply will result in immediate proceedings. The little spark of happiness vanished. Sebastian noticed. Bad news, I forced a smile. Just life. His eyes narrowed slightly, not pressing, just observing. Then he nodded once. Life can be expensive, if only he knew. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to organizing receipts. When I finally looked up again, he was walking toward the door. That is it. You buy every flower in my shop and then leave? He paused beside the entrance. Rainwater still clung to the glass outside. The city beyond had started moving again. People rushing home, yellow taxis splashing through wet streets. For a second he looked back at me, really looked at me. Then he said quietly, "Thank you for making today a little brighter." Before I could respond, he stepped outside. The door closed behind him. The bell chimed softly. I stood frozen, confused, curious, completely unable to understand what had just happened. Across the street, the black car waited exactly where it had been all afternoon. Sebastian climbed inside. Seconds later, it disappeared into Manhattan traffic. I looked down at the receipt still sitting in my hands, the largest sale of my entire life. Then I looked around my nearly empty shop. Every flower sold, every arrangement accounted for. And somehow, despite everything, the strangest part was not the money. It was the feeling that I had just met someone carrying a story far heavier than his expensive suit could hide. People say hope arrives like sunlight. In my experience, it usually arrives disguised as confusion. 3 days after Sebastian Romano walked into my flower shop and turned my entire week upside down, I was still trying to make sense of what had happened. The money from that impossible sale sat safely in my business account. I had paid 1 month of overdue rent, ordered fresh inventory, caught up on utility bills that had been keeping me awake at night. For the first time in nearly a year, I could breathe without feeling panic wrapped around my ribs. Yet every morning, when I unlocked the front door of Carter Bloom's, part of me found myself looking down the street, watching, waiting. It was ridiculous. I barely knew the man. We had spoken for less than an hour, but there was something unfinished about the way he had left. Like the final page of a book had been torn out before I could read it. Friday morning arrived bright and cold. Sunlight spilled across the display windows, turning the shop into a little world of color. Pink roses, white lilies, blue hydrangeas, golden sunflowers. Flowers always seemed happier when the sun came out. I was arranging tulips near the front counter when the bell above the door chimed. My smile appeared automatically. Then I froze, not because Sebastian had returned, because nobody had entered at all. I frowned and walked toward the door. Hanging from the handle outside was a small white envelope. No name, no address, just a single fresh daisy tucked beneath the flap. I opened it carefully. Inside was a card. "Thank you for brightening a difficult day." No signature, no explanation, nothing else. I stared at the words for several seconds, then laughed softly to myself. "You are a very strange man, Sebastian Romano." I placed the card beside the register and went back to work. The next day, another envelope appeared, this time with a yellow rose attached. The world looks better when people choose kindness. Again, no signature. Again, no explanation. By the end of the week, there were 5 cards sitting beside my register, 5 flowers, 5 messages. Each one simple, each one thoughtful, and each one somehow arriving before I opened the shop every morning. My friend Chloe nearly spilled her coffee when I showed them to her. "This is absolutely a rich guy thing." I rolled my eyes. What does that even mean? It means regular men send text messages. Wealthy, mysterious men send handwritten notes with flowers. You watch too many romance movies, and you are pretending not to enjoy this. I hated that she was right, because I did enjoy it, not because of the attention, not because of the mystery. Because every message felt genuine. There was no flirting, no pressure, no expectation, just kindness, pure and simple, something surprisingly rare in New York City. A week later, something even stranger happened. I arrived at the shop early Monday morning and nearly dropped my keys. 3 customers were already waiting outside. By noon, 6 more had arrived. By closing time, I had sold almost every arrangement in the store. The next day was even busier. Then the day after that, and the day after that. Suddenly people were finding my shop from all over Manhattan. Young couples, office workers, families, brides planning weddings, business executives buying anniversary gifts. I could barely keep up. "Did you pay for advertising?" Chloe asked one afternoon while helping me organize deliveries. "No social media campaign? No magazine feature? No." She folded her arms. "Then somebody is helping you." I laughed. And who exactly would do that? But the truth was, I had been wondering the same thing. Business does not magically double overnight. Something was happening. I just could not figure out what. 2 weeks later, I got my answer. Sort of. A young woman walked into the shop carrying a bouquet she had purchased earlier that week. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Your flowers were beautiful, thank you. The recommendation was spot on." My smile faltered slightly. "Recommendation?" "Yes. The gentleman at the charity gala said your shop was the best florist in Manhattan." I blinked. "What gentleman?" She looked surprised. "The tall one, dark hair, expensive suit. Everybody seemed to know him." My heart immediately recognized the description before my brain did. "Sebastian." "Oh," the woman smiled. "He was very convincing." After she left, I sat behind the counter, staring at nothing for almost 5 minutes. Suddenly, pieces began fitting together. The customers, the referrals, the sudden attention, the impossible timing. Sebastian had been sending people here, quietly, without telling me, without asking for credit, without expecting gratitude. Just helping. The realization settled warmly inside my chest. Yet it also left me with questions. Why? Why would someone invest so much effort into a struggling flower shop he barely knew? Why would someone spend money, time, and influence on a stranger? Nothing about it made sense. Unless maybe it was never really about the flowers. Late that afternoon, the bell above the door chimed again. I looked up automatically. My heart immediately betrayed me, because there he was. Sebastian Romano stood in the doorway, wearing a charcoal coat and carrying the same calm presence that seemed capable of filling every room he entered. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes found the stack of cards beside the register. A faint look crossed his face, almost embarrassment, almost guilt. I slowly folded my arms. "You have been busy." For the first time since meeting him, Sebastian actually looked caught, and somehow that made me smile more than any flower ever could. For a moment, I simply enjoyed it. The man who always seemed perfectly composed looked unexpectedly uncomfortable standing in the middle of my flower shop. His gaze shifted from the stack of cards beside the register back to me, and I watched something almost boyish flicker across his face before disappearing again. "I can explain," he said. "That sounds promising." I leaned against the counter. "Because right now it looks like you secretly launched a marketing campaign for my business." A quiet laugh escaped him. The sound surprised me, genuine, completely different from the guarded man I had first met. "I may have mentioned your shop to a few people." "A few? Possibly more than a few." I shook my head. "Do you always interfere in the lives of strangers?" His expression softened. "Only when they matter." The answer landed somewhere deep inside my chest. Dangerous territory. I immediately looked away and pretended to rearrange a vase of white lilies. "Well, thank you." "You do not owe me thanks. Actually, I do. Business has nearly doubled." He glanced around the shop. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the flowers, turning the entire room golden, pink, and white. Customers had been coming steadily all day. For the first time in months, the shelves looked alive instead of desperate. Looks like people finally discovered what they were missing. I rolled my eyes. That was smooth. It was true. Somehow, conversations with Sebastian never felt forced. They flowed naturally, quietly, as if we had skipped several steps and landed somewhere familiar. He stayed for nearly an hour that afternoon, not because he needed flowers, not because he had business to discuss. He simply stayed. We talked about the city, about favorite restaurants, about the strange things people did during New York winters. I learned that he preferred black coffee, disliked crowded parties, and spent most of his time working. He learned that I loved old bookstores, collected antique flower vases, and could not keep a houseplant alive no matter how hard I tried. "You own a flower shop," he said. "I know. The irony is embarrassing." Another smile appeared. There it was again, that small transformation that happened whenever he forgot to guard himself. Late in the afternoon, an elderly customer entered carrying a cane. I immediately excused myself to help her select flowers for her granddaughter's birthday. By the time I finished wrapping the bouquet, Sebastian had quietly moved to one side of the store. I noticed him watching as I spoke with the customer, not staring, the same way he always seemed to observe everything. When the woman finally left, I found him standing beside a display of pale pink roses. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. That is not true." He hesitated. "You are good with people," I laughed. "That is funny because I spend most of my life convinced I am awkward. You make people feel important." The sincerity in his voice made me pause. "That matters more." For a second, neither of us spoke. Outside, evening shadows had begun stretching across the street. The city lights flickered on one by one. Cars moved past the window in streams of white and red. The shop felt smaller somehow, warmer, more personal. Sebastian checked his watch. Something shifted behind his eyes. A reminder, a responsibility. Whatever world existed outside these walls had come calling. "You have to leave." It was not a question. He nodded once. Unfortunately, I felt an unexpected disappointment. Ridiculous, we barely knew each other. Yet the thought of him leaving made the room feel quieter already. "Will I see you again?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His eyes lifted to mine. For one heartbeat, the entire shop seemed to disappear. There was only the scent of flowers and the soft hum of the refrigerator and the look on his face. Yes, the answer came immediately. Certain, absolute, as though there had never been another possibility. Somehow that certainty made me smile. Sebastian noticed. I knew he noticed because something softened in his expression. Same way sunlight softens hard edges. He walked toward the door, then stopped with his hand resting on the handle. "Olivia, yes? Keep smiling," I laughed softly. "You really are strange." "That is not new information." The bell chimed as he stepped outside. Through the front window, I watched him cross the sidewalk toward a waiting black car. The city swallowed him almost immediately, yet long after he disappeared into traffic, I found myself standing there, watching the empty street, wondering why someone who seemed to have everything carried so much sadness behind his eyes, and wondering why every time he walked away, it felt like he was taking a little of the light with him. Some people enter your life like a storm. Others arrive so quietly that you do not realize they have changed everything until you look back and notice the person you used to be no longer exists. Over the next few weeks, Sebastian became part of my routine in a way that felt both natural and completely unexpected. He never announced when he was coming, he simply appeared. Sometimes on a Tuesday afternoon, sometimes just before closing, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. And every single time he bought flowers, not entire inventories anymore, just one arrangement, one bouquet, one excuse to walk through the door. The strange thing was that he never seemed interested in talking about himself. Whenever the conversation drifted toward his work, he redirected it with almost professional skill. If I asked what he did, he would ask about the flower shop. If I asked where he traveled, he would ask about my favorite childhood memory. Somehow I always ended up talking while he listened. Really listened. Most people waited for their turn to speak. Sebastian paid attention as if every word mattered. One rainy Thursday evening, business had finally slowed enough for me to catch my breath. I was standing on a small ladder rearranging a display near the front window when the bell above the door chimed. I looked down and smiled immediately. "You are late." Sebastian glanced at his watch. I did not realize we had a schedule. "We do now." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Good to know." I climbed down carefully and handed him a fresh white rose. "There, what is this for?" "For being late." He accepted it with surprising seriousness. "I will try to improve," I laughed. The sound filled the shop more easily these days. Life had become lighter somehow. Not perfect, but lighter. The shop was thriving. Customers continued arriving. Online orders increased every week. For the first time since opening Carter Bloom's, I was thinking about expansion instead of survival. Yet despite all the positive changes, one question continued lingering in the back of my mind. Who exactly was Sebastian Romano? Because the more I observed him, the less he made sense. Some days he looked like a businessman. Other days he looked like someone carrying responsibilities larger than most people could imagine. Expensive watches, tailored suits, drivers waiting outside, phone calls he always took in private. There were pieces of a puzzle I could not quite fit together. The answer arrived by accident, as most life-changing answers do. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. The shop was crowded. Valentine's season was approaching, and customers filled nearly every corner. I was wrapping a bouquet when two women entered. One of them stopped suddenly after noticing Sebastian near the display cooler. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her friend immediately followed her gaze. Both women looked stunned. I glanced towards Sebastian. He seemed unaware of the attention. "What?" I asked. The first woman leaned closer. "Do you know who that is?" I laughed. Sebastian Romano." The way she said the name felt significant, like I was supposed to recognize it. Apparently my confusion was obvious because she stared at me in disbelief. "You seriously do not know?" "Know what?" Her voice dropped lower. "That man owns half the city." I smiled politely. "I think that might be an exaggeration." "No, I am serious." She glanced over her shoulder again. "My father works in commercial development. Everybody knows who Sebastian Romano is." Something cold slid through my stomach. Not fear, uncertainty. "He is a major investor?" I asked carefully. "Investor, real estate, shipping, finance, charities, foundations." She paused. Powerful people listen when he talks. Before I could ask another question, the women finished their purchase and left, but the conversation remained, echoing. I found myself watching Sebastian differently after that. Not because I was impressed by money, because suddenly certain things made sense. The confidence, the influence, the way doors seemed to open around him. Later that evening, after the last customer left, We stood near the front window, watching snow begin to fall over Manhattan. Tiny white flakes drifted beneath the streetlights, quiet, beautiful, peaceful. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Sebastian turned toward me. "Anything. How rich are you?" For 1 second, he looked genuinely surprised. Actually, he laughed, deep and warm and completely unguarded. "That is a dangerous question. That means very rich, probably." I folded my arms. "Why did you never tell me?" His expression softened. "Because it is not the most important thing about me. The answer should not have affected me, yet somehow it did, because he meant it." I could hear the truth in his voice. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the shop glowed with warm light and the scent of fresh flowers. For a moment, everything felt suspended, safe from the rest of the world. Then I noticed something again, that familiar sadness hiding behind his eyes, the same sadness I had seen on the first day. The same sadness that appeared whenever he thought nobody was looking, and for the first time I realized wealth was not the thing Sebastian was hiding. There was something else, something deeper, something painful, and whatever it was, it had followed him all the way into my little flower shop. The truth has a strange way of waiting until you are ready to hear it. A week passed after our conversation about Sebastian's wealth, and although nothing seemed different on the surface, I could feel something changing beneath it. The distance between us had grown smaller, the silences no longer felt awkward, the conversations lasted longer, yet the question that lingered in my mind remained the same. What was hiding behind that sadness? The answer came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Snow covered the sidewalks outside, softening the noise of the city. Business was slow, which was normal for a winter weekend. I was trimming the stems of white roses when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up and smiled automatically. Sebastian. He was carrying no flowers this time, no business phone, no visible distractions, just himself. Somehow he looked more tired than usual. "You look exhausted," I said. He glanced toward the display window. "Work?" For a moment he hesitated, then he nodded. "Something like that." I handed him a cup of coffee from the small machine behind the counter. "You need this." He accepted it with a grateful smile. "You always take care of everyone." Occupational places. Me behind the counter, him near the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily through the afternoon light. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then my eyes landed on something I had never noticed before. A silver chain partially visible beneath his sweater. Attached to it was a small pendant, a flower, tiny, delicate, completely unexpected. "What is that?" I asked. His hand instinctively moved toward it. For the first time since I had met him, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Nothing important? That means it is very important." He looked away. Silence settled between us, heavy this time. "Different?" I immediately regretted asking. "You do not have to tell me." His gaze remained fixed on the falling snow outside. "Her favorite flower was a white daisy." I frowned slightly. "Whose?" For several seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke so quietly I almost missed it. "My sister." The words seemed to change the air around us. I had never heard him talk about family before, never heard him mention anyone with that kind of tenderness. "You had a sister?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I still do." The answer confused me. "Still do?" He took a slow breath. "She passed away 8 years ago." My heart immediately sank. "Sebastian?" He gave a small shake of his head, not to stop me, more like he was steadying himself. "Her name was Sophia." I listened quietly. The city disappeared. The flower shop disappeared. There was only his voice. She could walk into a room and somehow make everything feel lighter. A faint smile appeared, sad and beautiful at the same time. People loved her instantly. She remembered birthdays, sent handwritten cards, brought flowers to strangers for no reason. His eyes lowered toward the coffee cup in his hands. She believed the world was kinder than it actually is. Something tightened painfully in my chest, because I knew that look. The look people get when they are speaking about someone they miss every single day. "You loved her very much." He laughed softly, "More than anyone." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. The way he had on the first day, the way he always seemed to when he forgot to protect himself. "The first time I saw you giving flowers to that elderly woman, I remembered her." My breath caught. "Me?" He nodded. "Sophia used to do things like that." Suddenly everything began fitting together. The flowers, the cards, the strange kindness, the way he watched me smile as though it mattered. "Sebastian," his expression softened. "For a second, standing outside your shop that day, it felt like the world had color again." I could not speak. Emotion filled my throat too quickly. He looked embarrassed by his own honesty and stared back out the window. "That probably sounds ridiculous." "No." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "It does not." The snow continued falling. Soft white flakes drifting through the grey afternoon. For the first time since meeting him, I finally understood part of the sadness he carried. It was grief. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind. The quiet grief that settles into your life and learns how to stay. The kind that never completely leaves. Sebastian had not come back because of flowers. He had not returned because of curiosity. He had returned because something about this little shop reminded him of someone he loved and lost. And somehow that realization made my heart ache for him even more than before. Then he looked at me and offered a small smile. Sophia would have liked you. I felt tears threaten the corners of my eyes. I wish I could have met her. His gaze lingered on me for one long moment. Sometimes, he said softly, I think you already did. After that afternoon, I could not stop thinking about Sophia. Not because Sebastian had compared us, not because of what he had said, because of the look in his eyes when he talked about her. It was the look people carry when love survives even after loss, the kind of love that becomes part of who you are. For the next several days, I found myself noticing little things differently. Every time Sebastian walked through the door, I paid closer attention. The way he always greeted every employee by name, the way he held doors open for strangers without expecting thanks, the way he remembered details from conversations that most people would forget. Maybe that was why Sophia had mattered so much. Maybe kindness ran in the family. February settled over Manhattan with icy mornings and bright afternoons. Business continued growing. Carter blooms felt alive. Delivery orders covered the bulletin board behind the register. Fresh inventory arrived almost daily. The little shop that had nearly disappeared now buzzed with energy from opening until closing. Sometimes I caught myself standing in the middle of it all, just taking a moment to be grateful. One afternoon, while organizing invoices, I heard a familiar voice. You are smiling again. I looked up. Sebastian stood near the counter holding a bouquet of white daisies. You keep appearing whenever that happens. Interesting coincidence. Very suspicious coincidence. A rare grin appeared. You are becoming difficult. He shook his head, but I could tell he was amused. The conversation drifted naturally as always, yet something felt different, not uncomfortable, just deeper. The walls between us had become thinner. We knew more about each other now, not everything, but enough to recognize when something was wrong. That was why I noticed immediately when his phone rang. The change was subtle. A slight tightening around his eyes, a shadow crossing his expression. He glanced at the screen and silenced the call. Then another came, then another. You should answer that. He stared at the phone for a moment. It can wait. It seems determined. He slipped the device into his pocket. I would rather be here. The words should not have affected me, yet they did, more than I wanted to admit. We spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. A new bakery that had opened 3 blocks away, the best places to watch snowfall in Central Park, a rescue dog he had recently adopted from a local shelter. I laughed so hard when he showed me a picture that tears appeared in my eyes. That dog definitely runs your life. Completely, I knew it. He knows it too. For a while, the sadness disappeared from his face. The tension vanished. He looked lighter, happier, more like the man he might have been before life gave him reasons to carry so much weight. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Patterson walked into the shop. The same elderly woman who had received those yellow roses weeks ago. Her eyes immediately landed on Sebastian. You, he looked surprised. Me? She pointed her cane toward him. You are the gentleman. Sebastian glanced toward me. I have no idea what is happening. Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. You paid for my flowers. Silence filled the shop. I looked at Sebastian. Sebastian looked at the floor. The answer was obvious before anyone spoke. Sebastian. He rubbed the back of his neck. It was not a big deal. You told her it was a secret admirer. Mrs. Patterson laughed softly. Young man, you are terrible at keeping secrets. I folded my arms. How many other secrets are you hiding? Probably too many. The honesty caught me off guard. For one brief moment, something passed between us. Something quiet, something real. Then Mrs. Patterson interrupted by placing a gentle hand on Sebastian's arm. Your sister would be proud of you. Every trace of humor disappeared from his expression, not because he was upset, because the words mattered. I could see it. The older woman smiled kindly and walked away to browse flowers. Sebastian remained still for several seconds, looking down, thinking. Finally he spoke. You know, she used to say something. Sophia? He nodded. She believed people leave pieces of themselves behind. I listened quietly. She said kindness works that way. One small act becomes another, then another. His gaze lifted toward the customers moving through the shop, the flowers, the laughter, the life filling the room. Sometimes I think she was right. My heart squeezed painfully, because in that moment I understood something important. The reason Sebastian kept coming back had changed. At first, maybe he had come because of a memory. Maybe because I reminded him of someone he loved. But now it was something else. Something neither of us had expected. And judging by the way he looked at me when he thought I was not paying attention, I had a feeling he was starting to realize it too. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday morning. At the time, I did not realize it was a crack. I thought it was simply another ordinary day. The shop was busy. Spring was slowly pushing winter out of Manhattan. Fresh tulips filled the front display. Customers moved in and out carrying bouquets wrapped in brown paper and ribbon. Life felt good, stable, hopeful. That alone should have made me suspicious. Good things have a habit of making you forget how quickly life can change. I was carrying a tray of arrangements toward the cooler when Chloe rushed through the front door holding her phone. Olivia. Something in her voice immediately made me stop. What happened? She looked uncomfortable. I think you should see this. My stomach tightened. She handed me the phone. An online article filled the screen. A photograph sat at the top. Sebastian. The image looked recent. He was stepping out of a black vehicle surrounded by men in dark suits. The headline made my pulse stumble. Business tycoon Sebastian Romano linked to investigation into privateering networks. I read it twice. Then 3 times. The article itself contained very little information, rumors, speculation, anonymous sources, yet one phrase repeated several times: powerful underground connections. My chest felt strangely cold. This is probably nonsense, Chloe said carefully. I wanted to agree immediately, but something stopped me. All the unanswered questions, all the conversations he had redirected, all the things he never discussed. Suddenly they returned, louder than before. Olivia? Chloe touched my arm gently. Talk to him, I nodded, because that was the reasonable thing to do. Talk to him, ask questions, get answers, yet the uneasiness remained. The entire day felt different after that. Every customer interaction became harder. Every smile required effort. By closing time, my thoughts had become a tangled mess of uncertainty. Then the bell above the door chimed. My heart reacted before my brain did. Sebastian, he stepped inside carrying his usual calm presence, but one look at my face and he knew something was wrong. What happened? I folded my arms, not because I needed something to hold on to. Who are you, Sebastian? The question landed between us, heavy, unexpected. He went still, not defensive, not surprised, just still. Slowly, I handed him the phone. His eyes moved across the screen, the article, the photograph, the headline. When he finished reading, he placed the phone carefully on the counter. Silence followed, the kind of silence that changes things. Some of it is true, he said quietly. My heart dropped. Not because of what he admitted, because of how tired he suddenly looked. What does that mean? He looked toward the window, toward the city beyond the glass. It means there are parts of my life I never told you about. Why? A sad smile appeared. Because I liked who I was when I was here. The answer hurt more than I expected. Sebastian, he met my eyes. Everything between us was real, Olivia. Then tell me. For several seconds he said nothing. I could practically see the battle happening behind his eyes. The business world people see is only part of my life. My stomach tightened further. And the rest? His gaze lowered briefly. Complicated. That is not an answer. I know, frustration mixed with disappointment. Not because I thought he was dangerous, not because of the article, because I realized there were entire chapters of his life hidden from me. How long were you planning to keep this secret? He looked genuinely pained. I do not know. That is not fair, I know. The honesty made everything worse. Outside, evening sunlight reflected across the window. Inside, the flower shop suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Why did you come into my life? I asked softly. His expression changed, immediate, certain, because of you. I shook my head. No, the truth. That is the truth. His voice remained calm. At first, maybe it was a memory, maybe it was grief, but that stopped a long time ago. My chest tightened painfully. Then what is it now? For one heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he answered, now it is you. The sincerity in his voice almost broke me, because I believed him, every word. Yet belief did not erase uncertainty. It did not erase secrets. It did not erase the feeling that there was a world surrounding Sebastian Romano that I did not understand, a world much larger than flower shops and handwritten notes and quiet afternoons. Finally, I looked away. I think you should go. Pain flashed across his face. brief but unmistakable, "Please." The silence that followed felt endless. Then he nodded once, slowly, respectfully, like a man accepting something he never wanted. He walked toward the door, his hand rested on the handle. For a second, I thought he might say something else. Instead, he looked back at me and offered a small, sad smile. I never lied about the important things. Then he stepped outside. The bell chimed softly, the door closed. And for the first time since Sebastian Romano entered my flower shop, I watched him leave without knowing if he would ever come back. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it does not arrive all at once. It settles in quietly, like dust, like winter, like a song you cannot stop hearing long after it ends. The days after Sebastian left felt exactly like that. Carter blooms remained busy, customers still arrived with smiles, deliveries still needed arranging. Life continued moving forward whether my heart wanted it to or not. Yet everything felt different. The shop felt different. The chair near the window where he liked to sit remained empty. The coffee cups stayed stacked on the shelf because there was nobody to share them with. Even the flowers seemed quieter somehow. I told myself I had done the right thing. Trust mattered. Honesty mattered. If Sebastian had hidden such a large part of his life, I deserved answers. That was reasonable, mature, sensible. Unfortunately, none of those things made me miss him any less. A week passed, then another. No visits, no flowers, no handwritten cards, no messages, nothing. The silence hurt more than I expected. One rainy afternoon, I found myself standing near the front window watching people hurry through the city beneath umbrellas. Grey clouds hung low over Manhattan, the same kind of weather from the day Sebastian first appeared. Funny how memories worked. "You are staring at the street again." I looked away. "I am not. You absolutely are," I sighed. "Maybe a little." She crossed her arms. "Then call him." "No." "Why?" "Because I was afraid. Not of Sebastian, of what I might discover, of what I might feel, of how much I already cared." Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Both of us looked up. My heart jumped, then immediately fell. It was not Sebastian. Instead, a middle-aged man wearing a navy coat entered carrying a small envelope. "Olivia Carter?" he asked. "That is me." He handed me the envelope and left before I could ask questions. No explanation, no conversation, just gone. My pulse quickened slightly. I already knew who had sent it. The handwriting confirmed it. Sebastian. For several seconds I simply stared at the envelope. Then I opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, nothing else, no note, no message, just a picture. My breath caught. The photograph showed a small garden filled with white daisies. Sunlight poured across the image. At the center stood a young woman smiling at the camera. Sophia, I knew immediately. The resemblance was not physical, not exactly. It was something softer, the warmth in her eyes, the kindness in her smile, the feeling that the world became lighter around her. I turned the photo over. Written on the back were 6 simple words. "She would have loved your flowers." That was it. No defense, no excuses, no attempt to change my mind. Somehow that hurt more than any argument could have, because the message felt honest, vulnerable, real. That night I took the photograph home. I placed it beside my bedside lamp and stared at it longer than I should have. The next morning brought another surprise. A delivery truck arrived carrying 12 large planter boxes, beautiful cedar wood, brand new. I immediately called the supplier. There must be a mistake. The manager checked the order. No mistake. They were paid for weeks ago. My stomach tightened. Paid by who? Silence. Then a careful answer. A client requested anonymity. Of course he did. By lunchtime, workers had installed the planters outside the shop. Fresh flowers filled each one. The entire storefront looked transformed. More welcoming, more beautiful, more alive. Customers stopped constantly to admire them. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I found myself smiling despite everything. That evening after closing, I stepped outside to water the new flowers. The city glowed around me. Headlights reflected off wet pavement. Music drifted from a nearby restaurant. Spring was finally arriving. I was adjusting a planter when a familiar voice spoke behind me. They looked better than I imagined. Every muscle in my body froze. Slowly I turned around. Sebastian stood several feet away. No suit this time, just a dark jacket and tired eyes. For a moment neither of us spoke. The city noise faded into the background. There was only him. Only us. "You paid for these?" He nodded once. "Yes." I looked at the flowers, then back at him. "Why?" A sad smile touched his face. "Because you discited painfully." "Sebastian." He looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. "I meant what I said, Olivia." The sincerity in his voice made it difficult to breathe. "About what?" His gaze never left mine. The important things. The silence that followed felt endless, because for the first time since he walked away, I realized something terrifying. No matter how many questions remained unanswered, Part of my heart had never stopped waiting for him to come back. For several seconds neither of us moved. The evening air carried the scent of fresh soil and flowers from the new planters lining the sidewalk. Traffic rolled past in the distance. Somewhere down the block, musician played a slow melody on a saxophone. New York kept moving, yet the moment felt suspended outside of time. Sebastian stood beneath the glow of a street lamp, his hands in his jacket pockets, watching me with the same quiet intensity that had followed him since the day we met. "You should not have done this," I said softly, looking at the flowers surrounding us. "Probably not. Then why did you?" A faint smile touched his face. Because walking away did not change how I felt. My heart betrayed me immediately. I looked down at the planter beside me, pretending to adjust a flower that did not need adjusting. "You make everything sound simple. It is simple. No, it is not." The words came out sharper than I intended. "You disappear for weeks. I find out there are entire parts of your life I know nothing about. Then you show up with another grand gesture and expect everything to be fine?" His expression never changed, but I could see the hurt behind his eyes. "I do not expect that." The honesty stopped me. "Then what do you expect?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "A chance." The city noise seemed to fade again. "A chance to do what?" "Tell you the truth." I folded my arms tight away. Another part had been waiting for this conversation since the day he left. "Then tell me." Sir Sebastian nodded slowly. "Not here." I hesitated. Every reasonable instinct told me to be careful. Yet, every instinct I trusted told me something else, that whatever secrets he carried, they were not the secrets of a cruel man. They were the secrets of someone afraid of losing the few things he loved. 20 minutes later, we sat inside a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks away. The evening crowd had thinned. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers. Warm light reflected off dark wood tables. Sebastian sat across from me holding a cup of coffee he had barely touched. For the first time since I had met him, he seemed nervous. "The articles were not completely wrong," he said finally. I listened without interrupting. "My family built businesses over several generations: shipping, construction, investments, charities. Some parts are public, some parts are private." He paused. "And some people assume the worst because power makes an easy headline. Are they wrong?" He considered the question carefully. "Sometimes." It was not a perfect answer, yet it felt truthful. "I have spent years trying to protect what my family built," he continued. "After Sophia died, it became easier to focus on work than on anything else." His gaze lowered briefly. "Work does not ask you to heal." The sadness in his voice made my chest ache. "And then you walked into a flower shop." A small smile appeared. "Actually, you were standing outside it." Despite everything, I laughed. The sound seemed to ease some invisible tension between us. Sebastian looked relieved just hearing it. "Do you know what scared me most?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "You." My eyebrows lifted. "Me? You made me care about things again." The confession hung in the air between us. "That sounds terrible." It was terrifying. I laughed again. This time he joined me. The warmth that followed felt familiar. Like coming home after being away too long. For nearly 2 hours we talked. No distractions, no careful redirections. He told me stories about Sophia, about the rescue dog that had destroyed 3 expensive rugs, about the loneliness that followed him through crowded rooms and business dinners and luxury apartments. And slowly I began to understand something important. Sebastian Romano was not hiding because he enjoyed secrets. He was hiding because he had spent years believing people would only see the headlines instead of the person. When we finally stepped back outside, the city glittered beneath a clear night sky. We walked together toward the flower shop. Neither of us seemed eager for the evening to end. As we approached the storefront, I noticed something unusual. Several customers stood outside admiring the new planters. One woman pointed toward the display and smiled. "This place is beautiful." Her words were simple. Yet I watched Sebastian's reaction, the quiet satisfaction, the happiness he tried to hide. In that moment a realization settled inside me. He never cared about being thanked. He never cared about recognition. What mattered to him was seeing other people happy. Maybe that was what Sophia had left behind. Maybe that was the piece of her still living inside him. We stopped in front of the shop. The flowers swayed gently in the evening breeze. "So where do we go from here?" I asked. Sebastian looked at me, really looked at me. The way he always did when he forgot to protect himself. Then he smiled. Not the guarded smile, not the polite one, the real one, hopefully forward. And for the first time in weeks I found myself believing that was possible too. Sometimes happiness arrives so quietly that you do not trust it at first. The weeks that followed felt exactly like that. Spring settled over Manhattan. The trees lining the sidewalks began turning green again. Customers lingered longer outside the flower shop. Sunlight filled the front windows each morning, and somehow, without either of us officially deciding it, Sebastian became part of my everyday life. He still disappeared occasionally for meetings and responsibilities I did not fully understand, but now he always came back. Sometimes he arrived carrying coffee, sometimes he brought photographs of his dog doing something ridiculous, sometimes he simply walked through the door and sat near the window while I worked. There was comfort in that, a kind of peace I had never experienced before. One Saturday afternoon, the shop was so busy that I barely had time to breathe. Mother's Day was approaching, and every cooler was packed with flowers, waiting to become arrangements. I was balancing 3 orders, answering a phone call, and trying not to panic when Sebastian appeared beside me. "You look stressed, very observant." He glanced at the stack of order forms. "How can I help?" I laughed. "You? I am capable of following instructions. That remains unproven." 10 minutes later, Sebastian Romano, one of the most powerful businessmen in New York, was carrying buckets of flowers from the storage room while customers tried very hard not to stare. The entire situation was absurd, and yet watching him work made me smile. He never complained, never acted important, never behaved as though helping was beneath him. At one point, Mrs. Patterson walked into the shop and nearly dropped her purse. "Well," she announced loudly, "this is a surprise." Sebastian looked up from a bucket of tulips. "Good afternoon." She pointed her cane at him. The entire shop laughed, including Sebastian. By closing time, my feet ached and my hands smelled like roses. But every order was finished, every customer left happy. As I locked the front door, Sebastian handed me a bottle of water. "You survived." "Barely." We started walking through the city together. Evening sunlight reflected from glass buildings. The air felt warmer than it had in months. Around us, New York moved with its usual energy. Taxis, street musicians, couples holding hands, ordinary life. The kind of life I had always wanted. "Can I ask you something?" Sebastian said. I glanced toward him. "You usually do." His expression grew thoughtful. "Why flowers?" The question surprised me. "What do you mean?" "You could have done anything, opened any business, chosen any career." He looked at me carefully. "Why this?" For a moment I considered giving an easy answer. Then I decided to tell the truth. After my parents died, everything felt grey. The words came quietly. Not dramatic, just empty. One day someone sent flowers to our apartment. Nothing expensive, just a small bouquet. I smiled faintly at the memory. The room felt different afterward, brighter somehow. We stopped briefly at a crosswalk while traffic passed. I remember thinking that maybe beauty mattered more than people realized. My eyes drifted toward the setting sun. Flowers do not solve problems, but they remind people that difficult seasons do not last forever. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, thoughtful. Then Sebastian spoke. "That sounds exactly like something Sophia would have said." The comment made me smile. "I think I would have liked her. You would have loved her." We continued walking. Neither of us noticed how naturally our pace matched, how comfortable the silence felt, how easy everything had become. Finally we reached a small park overlooking the river. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, and sat together watching sunlight dance across the water. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Sebastian broke the silence. I spent years believing my life was already decided. His voice remained calm, but I heard the vulnerability beneath it. Work, responsibilities, expectations. He shook his head slightly. I stopped imagining anything else. My heart tightened. "And now?" He turned toward me. The look in his eyes stole every prepared thought from my mind. "Now I am not so sure." The honesty of the moment settled between us, real, unavoidable. For the first time I realized neither of us was standing on safe ground anymore. Whatever existed between us had grown beyond friendship, beyond gratitude, beyond coincidence. The realization should have frightened me. Instead it felt strangely right, like a door opening after being locked for years. As the last sunlight disappeared behind the skyline, Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket and handed me something small. A folded piece of paper. Asked, "Open it later. That sounds suspicious." A smile touched his face. "Trust me." I slipped it carefully into my purse. Then we sat together watching the city lights appear one by one across Manhattan. Neither of us knew it yet, but that small folded note would change everything. I did not open the note until later that night. The flower shop was closed. The city outside my apartment window glowed beneath a blanket of stars and distant traffic lights. I sat on the edge of my couch, in my hands, and stared at the folded piece of paper Sebastian had given me. For reasons I could not explain, my heart was racing. Slowly I unfolded it. Inside was a single handwritten sentence. Meet me tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Trust me, no address, no explanation. Then written beneath it a second line. You once said flowers remind people that difficult seasons do not last forever. I smiled despite myself. The next day passed painfully slowly. Every arrangement felt like it took twice as long to complete. Every customer conversation seemed endless. By 3:30, Chloe was openly laughing at me. You have checked the clock 14 times. That is not true. It is exactly true. She handed me my coat. Go. What if this is something ridiculous? Then at least you will finally stop staring at the door every 5 seconds. At 3:45, a black car arrived outside the shop. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. My pulse immediately betrayed me. 15 minutes later, the car left Manhattan behind and crossed a bridge toward a quieter part of the city. Sebastian had still not told me where we were going. When the vehicle finally stopped, I stared through the window in confusion. A large wrought iron gate stood ahead. Beyond it stretched several acres of land filled with gardens, walking paths, fountains, and rows upon rows of flowers, thousands of them, every color imaginable, every shape, every season. It looked like something from a dream. The gate opened, the car rolled forward, my breath caught. Sebastian. He smiled from beside me. Keep looking. We followed a winding path lined with white roses and flowering trees. Finally, the car stopped beside a small stone building surrounded by gardens. I stepped out slowly. The air smelled like spring and sunlight and fresh earth. For several seconds I could not speak. What is this place? Sebastian walked beside me. His expression seemed calmer than I had ever seen it, lighter somehow. 3 months ago, it was abandoned property. I looked around again. 3 months ago, he nodded. I bought it. My confusion deepened. Why? Instead of answering, he guided me toward a wooden sign near the entrance. Freshly carved letters stretched across polished oak. The moment I read them, every thought disappeared. Carter Gardens. My eyes widened. Sebastian. He looked nervous. Actually nervous, which somehow made the moment even more real. The flower shop changed my life. His voice remained steady, but emotion lingered beneath every word. You changed my life. I stared at him, unable to move, unable to speak. He continued, this place will provide free gardening programs for children, community events, scholarships, and public gardens. His gaze met mine. A place where beauty belongs to everyone. You named it after me? He smiled softly. You inspired it. The world seemed to blur for a moment. Sunlight shimmered across the gardens. Birds moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, water flowed gently from a fountain. Everything felt impossibly beautiful. Then Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket. My heart nearly stopped. Not because of what he pulled out, because of the look on his face. The honesty, the vulnerability, the hope. He held out a small velvet box. Olivia, my eyes immediately filled with tears. Sebastian, he laughed softly. I had a speech prepared. Of course you did. It was much better than what is about to happen. Despite my tears, I laughed. He opened the box. A simple ring caught the afternoon sunlight. Elegant, timeless, perfect. Then he looked at me the way he always had. Like I was something precious, something worth protecting, something worth choosing. I spent years believing my life was already written. His voice grew quieter. Then a woman standing in a flower shop reminded me that people can bloom again after loss. Tears slipped down my cheeks. You brought color back into my world. He took a slow breath. And I would like to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget how extraordinary you are. The gardens disappeared. The city disappeared. There was only him, only us, only the impossible path that had led from a struggling flower shop to this moment. Olivia Carter. His smile trembled slightly. Will you marry me? I did not even let him finish the last word. Yes. His eyes closed briefly as relief flooded across his face. Then he laughed, a real laugh, bright and warm and happy. The kind of laugh I realized I wanted to hear for the rest of my life. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I looked around at the flowers swaying gently beneath the spring sun, and for the first time I understood exactly what hope looked like. 2 years later, I stood beneath an arch covered in white roses and watched the afternoon sunlight spill across Carter Gardens. Sometimes I still had trouble believing any of it was real. The gardens had become everything Sebastian dreamed they could be. Families visited every weekend. Children learned how to plant flowers in small community programs. Couples celebrated engagements beneath the flowering trees. Local artists displayed work during summer festivals. What had once been abandoned land had become a place filled with life, filled with hope, filled with color. The flower shop had changed too. Carter Blooms was no longer a struggling little storefront fighting to survive. We had expanded carefully, opening 2 additional locations while keeping the original shop exactly the way it had always been. The cracked corner of the front window had been repaired, the faded sign had been replaced, but the heart of the place remained the same: kindness first, flowers second. Some traditions deserved protecting. A familiar laugh pulled me from my thoughts. I turned and smiled immediately. Sebastian was standing near the fountain, holding the hand of a little girl with dark hair and bright eyes. Our daughter Sophia, named after the woman who had unknowingly changed both of our lives. She was 4 years old now and absolutely convinced she owned every flower in the garden. Honestly, most days she acted like she owned the entire city. "Mama!" she shouted before running toward me. I knelt and caught her in a hug. She smelled like sunshine and fresh grass. "Did you pick flowers again?" I asked. Her expression became suspiciously innocent. "Maybe." Sebastian reached us a moment later, shaking his head. "That means yes." I laughed. Some things never changed. The warmth in his eyes certainly had not. Neither had the way he looked at me. 2 years had passed since that afternoon in the gardens. 2 years since he asked me to marry him. Yet every time our eyes met, I still saw the same man who walked into a flower shop carrying more sadness than hope. The difference was that now the sadness no longer lived there alone. Peace had moved in beside it. Happiness had too. "The guests will be here soon," I said. Sebastian slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Then we should probably pretend to be responsible adults." Sophia immediately protested. "No," we both laughed. The annual spring celebration had become one of the garden's biggest events. Families from all over the city would arrive within the hour. Music would fill the pathways. Children would race through flower-lined trails. Volunteers would teach gardening classes. It was exactly the kind of place Sophia Romano would have loved. That thought still made me smile. Later that afternoon, while guests explored the gardens, I found myself standing beside the same wooden sign Sebastian had shown me years earlier, Carter Gardens. The letters had weathered slightly with time, yet seeing them still filled me with emotion. Footsteps approached from behind. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. "You are thinking again," Sebastian said. "Dangerous habit." "Very." He smiled and stood beside me. Together we watched children running through fields of flowers beneath the golden afternoon sun. "Do you remember the first day we met?" I asked. His smile widened. "Of course, you were very strange. I was trying my best." "That was your best?" He laughed softly. The sound still felt like home. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I looked at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." My gaze drifted across the gardens, across the flowers, across the life we had built together. "What were you really thinking that day?" Sebastian seemed to know exactly which day I meant. The beginning, the flower shop, the rain. He took a slow breath before answering, "Honestly, honestly." His eyes met mine, warm, steady, certain. I thought I was buying flowers. My heart smiled before I did. "And?" His expression softened. "It turns out I was finding my way home." Emotion filled my chest so quickly that I could not speak. Sebastian reached for my hand. The wedding ring caught the sunlight exactly the way it had on the day he placed it there. Around us, laughter drifted through the gardens. Flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, our daughter was enthusiastically explaining gardening techniques to people who had not asked. Life was imperfect, beautiful, ordinary in all the best ways. And as I stood there beside the man who had once walked into my shop carrying grief and left carrying hope, I finally understood something my mother had tried to teach me years ago. Flowers do not last forever. Seasons change. Storms come and go. But kindness has a way of self-divined. In gardens, in memories, in people. Sometimes one small act becomes another, then another, until an entire life blooms from it. And standing there with Sebastian's hand in mine, watching the people we loved fill a place built from hope, I realized that was exactly what had happened to us.